Hello, Augies Worldwide. I'm Dave Kassler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of Ask Dave. Today we're going to take a look at the Wolf River Coils Take It Along antenna. Now, this is why Wolf River Coils calls themselves what they do. This is a beautifully made adjustable coil that can be used with standard mounts on bumpers. They provide some stuff to go with it, and you adjust the antenna by moving this up and down like that. Okay, there's a little thing in there, and you can do fine adjustments by moving it this way around the coil, turning it as you face the coil with the whip at the top. If you turn it so that it's to the right, it will decrease the inductance, and if you turn it the other way, it will increase the inductance. Now this antenna comes with a bunch of stuff. I'll show you in a second. Let's jump into a review of this, shall we? This is our review of the Wolf River Coils TIA, which means Take It Along. It's a portable antenna that can be used for mobile, or if you want to use it for a fixed station, you can. If you happen to be on the ground floor of an apartment building where you can walk out into the grass in the back, you can set this thing out there, use it, and then take it back in. I purchased this with channel funds. This is not a freebie from the manufacturer. My bottom line for this thing is that it's easy to erect, a stinker to tune, works well, and easy to take down. And I have to admit, the construction quality on this and on the other parts and pieces is just downright excellent. Really well done. This is made in America, and nice antenna once you get it set up. It's a little hard to get set up. So let's take a look at what it is that we're reviewing. WolfRiverCoils.com is the URL, and you can buy direct from them. This is the Take It Along antenna, which consists of a coil, a few pieces and parts, and so on, and sells for $150. This is what I tested, the $150 one. This is not the one I tested, which has longer legs on the tripod. Either way, you're going to have to do something to stabilize that tripod. Okay, this is what comes in the package. You have the coil itself. Everything in Wolf River Coils centers around the coil. Note that this right here is connected not to the bottom of the coil, but to the input. Okay, this is the part that screws into the hub, into the input. So right up here, we've got about minimum amount of inductance on the coil. And you move this back and forth to change the loading on the whip. Now, I will warn you in advance that for 20 and higher, you will need to shorten the whip in order to get this to work. There are tripod legs with little nuts on them, the hub right there, and the radials. Note they're kind of a mess because I had this thing out back for a while we were testing it. This is how, they do not show this in the instructions. The coil attaches here, your coax attaches here. The tripod leg screws in, and get this bolt out of the way so you can screw the tripod leg all the way in and secure it maybe finger tight. And then before you did that, you slip the ground wire lug over it, and then you come in with the nut. Now, if you take my advice and cut this into shorter radials, these are 33 feet each, which is more than enough, too much, I think. You can cut them in half, you can cut them in quarters, you could cut them into tenths. Not tenths, cut them down to about 10 feet if you wanted. And then if you had more radials, you could put more under the nut. There are a total of 3 radials shipped with it. And that's the way I tested it. I tested it the way they shipped it. I didn't make any modifications on this thing. So assembly and tuning comments, it goes together very easily. Now, I want you to be aware of the whip like you would be aware of any whip antenna. This is the whip right here, okay? Now, as you pull this thing out, and don't forget, this, some people will take this as the top. There's actually one more under there. And so you can get that whip out quite a ways. This thing is really sturdy, but all whip antennas by their very nature are fragile. Now, I tested it with the 33-foot radials as it came packaged. If you're going to do something in a public park where there are other people around, you may want to trim to maybe 9 times 13-foot radials or something like that, so you have less area to keep track of, to keep people from dealing with a tripping hazard. I saw on one of the pictures on the Wolf River's website that they took that yellow police tape, just the tape without the words on it, and laid it over the radials so people could tell where they are. That's a good idea. I want to mention about that tripod, that dinky tripod. The tripod legs are 1 whole foot long. Okay, so it's 2 feet over here. A hint of wind will topple that over. However, if you can put a small sandbag on it or some rocks or something, you can keep the thing up, okay? We tuned it successfully in all bands, 80 through 10. Now, there's an online video on tuning it, but it only shows after tuning on each band. It does not show how to tune it. The instructions say that you should, tune for max noise in the radio, and yes, that's right. But the problem is, if you walk near the antenna, the tuning changes wildly. So you have to make an adjustment, step way back, take your measurement, go forward, make another adjustment, step way back, and we went through this for a long time. We found that, and like I said, the online tuning video only showed it once it was done, not the actual process of tuning it. Now, I will point out that for 20 and higher bands, you need to shorten the whip. The whip needs to be capacitive, because what you're doing with the coil is you are adding inductance. So if the whip becomes long enough on a band to be inductive, you can't counter inductance with inductance. So you have to shorten the antenna a little bit in order for it to act capacitively so that the coil can give you the inductance to cancel that out and make it tune properly. Now, very high Q on 20, we found that we needed to use the vernier method of tuning. I'll demonstrate that. Here is the antenna. You've got clicks going between, but if you turn this like this, see, from here down to here, puts you 1 turn lower. So if you need to change by half a turn, you can just change by half a turn. And we had to do that up here to get it to work on 20. When you're down on 80 meters down here in this region, it's downright easy to tune. Okay, so we did make it work. It would be ever so much easier if there were some markings on the coil to help with adjustment, like numbers of turns, or a green band and a yellow band and a blue band, or something like that, to know where to repeat this thing, so you don't have to be guessing from the very beginning. You can at least make some marks on this. I would suggest, use this right here as your dial. Note that there's another hole right there. When you get this thing completely tuned, like on 20, go in there with a marker, a permanent marker, and just splotch it in there as much as you can. maybe even if you were to kind of wrap this a little bit and then spray some paint in there, then you'll have a little circle of paint, and you can see it real easily here, and you can just move this up to where it's over that paint. Now, granted, the coil changes dimensions when it is warm versus cold, all that sort of stuff. So every time you use this, it'll be slightly different point. But if you have some place to start, it'd be so much easier. Now, one of the problems with tuning it is if you look on a graph showing the tuning across the band, it's not just a straight line down. It's wavy like this, so you will find false nulls on the thing. And that's just normal. It's the way the antennas work. So that's why it's helpful to have like a nanoVNA or something like that on it. Now, this is the setup we used for tuning. This is a nanoVNA. Okay, plugged right into the computer, which uses the nanoVNAsaver software, S-A-V-E-R, Saver. And I've done other videos on where to find that. But if you go to nanoVNA, then you can find that Saver software there and download it. Okay, for the testing, this is the actual setup that I used. I had a step IR, big IR, which is my main station antenna, okay? And then the Wolf River Coils TIA. They both go to lightning arresters at the ground rod. Then there's an antenna switch, the Delta 4 by Alpha Delta, which I use to switch back and forth between these antennas. The circuit goes through a high-power SWR meter, an amplifier that's in bypass, an ICOM 7300 front end, where it is a little gadget called the PRTX 7300, takes the RF out of the 7300 after it's gone through the bandpass filter, but before anything digital happens to it. Okay, and then another antenna switch that I use as the antenna switch for my SDR Play RSP1A. Okay, because I've got some other small antennas and receive-only antennas, stuff like that that I use for it. So then we go to the SDR Play house software, SDR Uno, and it's software from SDR Play, and that leads us to the displays on the next page. Now this is the bottom half of the 20-meter band. I took video as I switched back and forth, you know, saying out loud, okay, I'm on step IR, now I'm on TIA, so on, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And these two were both taken, and you can see right there, this right here is 0 time. This right here is 0 time, but notice that a lower frequency, this is, FT8. A low one is here, and I did measuring, and I went back and forth, and I looked at a couple examples of this, okay, and I found this to my surprise, because I considered the step IR, big IR to be my standard antenna. Okay, so what I found here, this had an 80 dB SNR on the big IR. This same signal had about a 95 decibel SNR on the Wolf River coil. I thought that what I would see is just plain less over on the Wolf River coil because it is an undersized compromise antenna. But as I have said many times, loading an antenna, the compromise, is not what you can hear, it's the bandwidth of what you can hear. Sometimes you'll end up with a tuning that won't allow you to cover the whole band. So anyway, we've got these tuned, and the thing that is not the fact that one is higher than the other. The Wolf River coil has slightly less noise out here by very little. but it's the signal-to-noise ratio, and I found a striking difference in signal-to-noise ratio. Now, if you look over here at this Morse code signal, the problem is it's up and down and up and down and up and down. Here you can tell that it's about 10, 20, 25 dB. Here it's about 5, 10, 20 dB, so about 5 dB lower. But again, this is Morse code, so they're not taken at the exact time. I would not dwell on the 15 dB difference here. I would just say this. The Wolf River coil, when tuned, is a competent vertical antenna. Okay? And this goes for all loaded vertical antennas. They'll have narrower bandwidth, but they will still receive about as well as a full-sized antenna. Okay, so this in fact leads to the idea of, why don't you just have a fixed length vertical antenna, short enough to be capacitive at most bands, and then feed it at the bottom with a antenna tuner right at the bottom of the antenna. That way you won't get high losses in the coax, and you can have the antenna tuner follow the frequency of the radio in the shack. There is an attachment on the back of my 7300 that will do just that. So let's go through a few conclusions. This is not a drop and run antenna. The high Q tuning must be done by hand. This is my biggest beef with the antenna. It has to be done by hand. There's no little motors that will push that thing up and down for you. It's definitely a portable antenna. Now, Wolf River Coils shows that it can be used as a mobile antenna, but you will have to remember that if you need to change bands, or even the part of the band you're on, you're going to have to get out and change the coil. Okay? Hard to do at 80 miles an hour on the freeway. It is a stinker to tune, and again, I really suggest some reference markers on that antenna so that we can get to a tune more quickly. And I talk again about that hand capacitance and body capacitance. Remember, the first rule of antennas is that everything affects everything. But in this case, boy, you can sure see that as you're trying to tune it. The person with the SWR meter, or like a nanoVNA or something like that, has got to be well away from the antenna. And the person making the changes has got to be well away too. You can't look at the meter and make the changes at the same time. Just doesn't work. Now, I would recommend more but shorter radials for a fixed or portable. It comes with 3 33-foot radials. I suggest cutting that into thirds, and you'll have 3 11-foot radials on each lug, and then that'll come to a total of 9. And spread those out around where you're putting in the putting the radials out, spread them out around. Then you've got less area to worry about people coming in and so on and so forth. Okay, the workmanship quality on the thing is actually just plain stunning. I really, really like how well this is made. After you've used it for a while, you'll get used to tuning it, and then it will be less frustrating. You'll go, okay, 10 clicks from the top is 20 meters or something like that. You get kind of used to it. You get used to this idea of going back and forth like this. All right, so there you have it. The Wolf River Coils antenna was purchased with channel funds. This was not a freebie. Okay, it is a very well-built antenna, but quite frustrating to tune. You really need some sort of an analyzer that shows you a fairly wide piece of spectrum, like from 10 to 20 or something like that. So when you're tuning 20, you know you're not at the bottom of a false null. You're actually tuning what's supposed to be there. You do have issues with hand capacitance and with body capacitance. I am impressed as heck by the workmanship on this thing. I added a little bit in there to show how to connect the radials because the instructions omit that. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, here's a chart that shows different ways you can get in touch with me. And we'll end with the list of our patrons as of about the 24th of July. We'll update this about every month. I want to say a special thank you to the patrons and all of you who help make this channel possible. And until we next meet, 73.